Six Flags New Orleans in New Orleans, Louisiana was devastated after the tragic natural disaster of Hurricane Katrina, and the park is now defunct. But what if Hurricane Katrina never hit New Orleans? Or if it did, it actually never got destroyed? Tune in on What If to find out. In 2005, a Category 5 hurricane named Hurricane Katrina hit the coast of Louisiana. It caused flooding, deaths, and business destruction. Even to this day, Louisiana is still recovering from the events of Hurricane Katrina. But one thing that will sadly most likely not recover is the defunct Six Flags New Orleans. Before I go on and saying what if Six Flags New Orleans still existed, let's talk about some background history of Louisiana and its theme parks. Louisiana did not have much theme parks. They only had Pontchartrain Beach, but it was sitting there abandoned. But then in 1999, Palace Entertainment bought it, and it became the new Jazzland theme park. And the park was doing good and attract guests, and people in Louisiana were finally happy to have a theme park. But as Jazzland was losing money, Six Flags decided to buy them in 2002. And of course, we saw the re-theme of DC and Bugs Bunny stuff later on in 2003. And the park was doing pretty well, and actually Six Flags pretty much liked it. But then in 2005, something that no one could have predicted happened. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina, a Category 5 hurricane, hit the coast of Louisiana. Houses were underwater, neighborhoods were demolished, and lots of people lost their lives. And one of the many other things tragic that went wrong with Louisiana from the hurricane was also Six Flags New Orleans. The park had a flooding system in case any flooding happened and took out water from the park, but for some reason that flooding system broke, just like the other ones in Louisiana, and that's how other houses got flooded too. And Six Flags New Orleans, just like the rest of those houses that went underwater, also went underwater. Water fried the circuits of many rides on ground level. Only a handful of rides were able to make it out alive by sticking above because they were lifted up higher than most other rides. Examples of those are Batman the Ride Clone, which was at New Orleans, and their SNS drop tower. But what if Hurricane Katrina never hit New Orleans, or if it did, it somehow was not able to flood the park and it still survived to this day? I'm not talking about of how it was going to be in the future now. I'm talking about if Six Flags still owned it and if it never got flooded or destroyed. So if you remember, in 2005, Six Flags was planning on adding more rides to the park. So let's predict what their new ride could have been, or what new additions they have gotten, as well as ride removals. So let's begin with the ride removals or new rides for Six Flags New Orleans. Now remember how much space New Orleans has. They are not landlocked too much, but eventually they will get landlocked. They're too close to neighborhoods that at one point they can't go any farther because then it will disrupt the neighborhoods around them. But it doesn't mean that can stop them, because also it can remove some of their rides. Now at that time, it was the coaster war still, just a little bit, but it was still a coaster war. We saw Millennium Force go to Cedar Point, and X surprising guests at Magic Mountain, and more coasters. Now, Six Flags New Orleans being a middle tier park wouldn't get something impressive yet. It's kind of hard to predict what type of coaster would come to Six Flags New Orleans, but I would kind of predict a B&M Floorless, or at that time we saw the premier launch coaster went to Discovery Kingdom, and that was kind of shocking. So maybe instead of Discovery Kingdom, it could have been New Orleans, or any other coaster like X Flight at Six Flags Great America, which shocked people, and is currently the only wing coaster at a Six Flags park. So maybe during the 2000s, if it wasn't Great America, maybe New Orleans could have gotten it instead. Now remember, during this time, Six Flags was struggling financially. They were becoming bankrupt and running out of money. That's how we saw Frontier City and Six Flags Belgium go away for a while. Now, if you remember the correct reason why New Orleans was never to become fixed because of the hurricane, we realized that they didn't forcefully try to not have New Orleans as the park. They wanted New Orleans as a Six Flags park, but because it was really destroyed and they realized how much money New Orleans was bringing in, it was no point of sacrificing more money and becoming more bankrupt for a park that gave a little bit of money. Now, the only reason why they said no is also because it was destroyed and they had to fix it. If it wasn't destroyed, I bet New Orleans would have stayed as a park and they would have not removed it, because it was doing a little bit better than Frontier City was at that time. And in 2010, we see the addition of the first ever RMC coming over Texas. So that starts off the RMC trend, and eventually New Orleans would get to that trend because most Six Flags parks now have an RMC with them. So New Orleans, it would be no different, and we would probably see the removal of Mega Zeph at that time, and maybe a new Iron Zeph or something. And also, don't forget that the ride rotation program came to a close during that time, so no more coasters will be transported from park to park, meaning one of the coasters which will probably go away is the Jester. The coaster is extremely old, is probably in poor condition, and is very rough. At some point in time, they would have to remove this ride, and I feel like a Pandemonium clone would probably go there, because during that time in the 2000s, they were really all the rage at Six Flags parks. So in result for this category, ride removals and new ride additions, for the new ride additions, I would either see a B&M Floorless, a B&M Wing Coaster possibly, then maybe a Pandemonium clone, then an RMC of Mega Zeph, and as time goes on, the usual Six Flags stuff, which is a free spin or Larson Loop, and tons of flat rides. For ride removals, I would see the removal of Mega Zeph becoming an RMC, and the removal of the Jester because it's too old, and another roller coaster or ride would replace the old coaster. Now I know Zydeco Scream is also old for a boomerang coaster, but I still feel like it would have stayed at the time because boomerang coasters don't usually go away that much. Some of them have gone away in Six Flags parks, but it's extremely rare to the point where I don't think New Orleans would remove Zydeco Scream yet. So let's move on to the next category. Like I said in the beginning of the video, Six Flags New Orleans is not top tier, but it will definitely fall in the middle tier category. But how would it fit in the flagship parks? Or maybe, will Six Flags sell it off just like Frontier City? To be honest, I highly doubt this. New Orleans was being really successful at that time. Sure, they didn't give too much money to Six Flags, but it was definitely worth saving, but just not enough to completely rebuild the whole park from the hurricane. Like, I wouldn't blame Six Flags because they were low on money, a hurricane destroyed one of their favorite parks, and they expect to rebuild it all over again with what money? That's pretty much how it is. Six Flags bought Six Flags New Orleans for a reason. They didn't just do it because they want to create an army of Six Flags parks to take over Cedar Point. And yes, I know they do that, but it was different for New Orleans. Louisiana only has one park, and that's Six Flags New Orleans. And if they did that, it would draw more crowds and more people who live in Louisiana to go to Six Flags parks and say, oh, I like it. Why don't we go to other Six Flags parks around the United States? And you do know there's no Six Flags in Florida, so people can just travel to Louisiana and go there. Six Flags knew what they were doing, and their marketing plan was smart. But obviously the park's not the favorite like Magic Mountain or Great America, getting coasters almost every single year. Six Flags New Orleans would probably get mediocre roller coasters and eventually the world's first coaster at some point. So if the park still existed, it would perfectly fit in with the flagship parks, adding some more diversity to the park. But no matter how hard we imagine Six Flags New Orleans becoming a park again, it's most likely never gonna happen. It's still rotting to this day. And no matter how many companies come and give a plan for the park, it never seems to happen. And now the pandemic, the least thing anyone's thinking about is Six Flags New Orleans. Hopefully someday, Six Flags New Orleans will be revived and have brand new coasters and thrills, and the citizens of Louisiana can have a new theme park to go to again. But what do you think? Do you think my predictions of what if Six Flags New Orleans still existed was pretty accurate? Or do you think that Six Flags New Orleans will ever become a theme park again? Comment down below. Thank you for watching. This is JB Thrills, signing out.
could tell you how long
I got 63 years.
57 years.
before you die, would you want to know?